How are we today? So I'm just doing a little Bitcoin update. As you can see, a couple of hours ago I updated the guys over in TIA Premium about this, and now I wanted to update everyone publicly. And basically, last night I talked about, you can see right here, not last night, yesterday afternoon for me over here in Brisbane, Australia, I talked about how it looked like potential Wyckoff distribution on the 1 hour chart. And you can come over to TradingView and you can see that would have been sometime around here where we were breaking beneath the lows and it looked like we were making a failed retest. Now, obviously, we had two failed retests here. And if we go over to our Wyckoff distribution schematic, specifically this one, the schematic 2, which I thought looked very similar, you can see we had an upthrust in phase B, which I would count this. We've made a lower top, or you could consider it almost like a rounding top, depending on how you look at it. And after that, we've had a sell-off beneath the previous lows. Then we've made a failed retest, or two failed retests, which would be our last point of supply. And then obviously we've had a big sell-off. Now, big in terms of a 1 hour chart is exactly what you might expect, a $1,000 to $2,000 move. And obviously you could say that the news catalyst was that guy who had like his billions of dollars of Bitcoin for 10 plus years, didn't touch it, just moved it onto an exchange, and everyone was scared him selling would crash the price of Bitcoin. But this just goes to show, like, you can see the technical signs of weakness, then you get that news catalyst, and then boom, the price sells off. Now, we found support right on this line right here, which is the bottom trend line of the rising consolidation that Michael Pizzino talked about back in April. And obviously that rising consolidation led to a nice breakout into a new all-time high. But now you can see we've respected this trend line many times, had this one big scare event. I can't even remember what it is. I think it was the Iran crisis, war with Israel thing. But obviously we've snapped right back above it, and we've had another little sell-off, and we've again snapped right back above it. Now, what you can see here is taking this little range here. I do apologize for my cluttered chart. You can see we've got our high to low, and price has failed at the 786 to 826 Fibonacci level, which Peter DiCarlo over at Traders Helping Traders talks about being like the institutional sell level, where if you're an institution and you bought millions or billions of dollars of Bitcoin at $100,000 and it comes up to 109,000, 110,000, are you going to keep buying or are you going to start selling? So that's kind of what he's basically talking about. But you can see we have made another daily higher low. Now, obviously, this daily higher low is yet to be confirmed. And one thing that I do want to take note is usually when we have a daily bar break, where like a sell-off, where that breaks the low of the previous bar, like here, you usually see at least one more day down, or at least another attempt lower on the next day before a attempt higher. Now, you can go back and test this yourself, but it is potential that the market is speeding up as we're getting closer to the end of the consolidation, where you might see just a 1 day correction before the trend resumes. But in my opinion, I am still 50-50. Like, I'm not fully decided, because you can see on the 1 hour chart we're respecting this support line. But if you come over to the 4 hour chart, I was talking about this again over in TIA Premium, where I was talking about the 4 hour reaccumulation pattern does not look as strong as it did anymore, because I was looking at it where if we didn't have this sell-off, you could see that price would break back above resistance and consolidate above resistance, which is a much stronger sign than if it breaks back beneath accumulation. Now, Michael Pizzino talks about this in his YouTube videos a lot, where if you see a breakout and then a break back beneath previous highs, it's not usually a strong sign. You can obviously see the bearish divergences on the stochastic RSI as well, and the selling pressure on the BX trender. Now, the saving grace is we have made a higher low, but which gives us a potential of this sort of accumulation pattern where it's potentially a last point of supply, where you can see the price has broken back up above resistance. We've had a failed move down into a higher low before the uptrend will continue. But the other possible sign is, oh my gosh, that is terrible. I will open it up here instead. The other possible sign is the higher low here does not hold and it instead sells off into a lower low. Now, obviously, I don't know what's going to happen next, but it does look like the stochastic RSI has the potential to make a bearish cross and we could sell off into a lower low. Jumping over to the daily chart, things are looking a bit more positive. Now, I was talking about a potential fourth time breakout on this bullish pennant here, and it looks like we have seen that breakout, but we have broken back beneath it. And you can see on the daily BX trender, we're now making lower highs, but we're not making lower lows, which is a good sign, which means a large sell-off is unlikely. Over on the, before I jump to the weekly chart, I was talking about this as in TIA Premium, that this touch point here on the 30th of June may not actually be considered the third attempt, just because it was such a quick wick. Like you can see on our first attempt, we actually closed on that trend line, made another attempt higher the next day, but failed. Sort of similar story on the second attempt, and sort of similar story on this attempt here. So it is potential that we take a couple more days on maybe the Monday or the Tuesday stock market session where we actually see that higher low get printed and the bullish pennant actually play out and take us to much higher prices. Now, jumping over to the weekly chart, you can see that my BX trender analysis from my previous video is still holding up. We have now seen 2 green weeks in a row of higher highs, because this week has made a higher high and a higher low, which indicates buying pressure. Now, obviously, what I'm doing is I'm tracking this 4-hour chart very closely to see whether we end up being a reaccumulation or a distribution pattern. Now, I'm usually pretty confident with these, but in this case, just because we've snapped back below these previous tops, I'm no longer as confident that we're going to see a move up higher before we see a move lower first. So what could happen is we could see, if I can find my drawing tool, we could obviously see our sell-off into a lower low. Now remember, we've got heaps of support down at 103, 102, 100, and 100,000. And we could obviously just start moving higher from there. Or, that of course absolutely doesn't have to happen, we could see just a attempt higher to test this 113k and then this 116k trendline level, which I have from, where do I have these from? Yeah, so this blue trend line was obviously the 100k top so far, a potential fourth time breakout of it, and this yellow trend line just being the all of Bitcoin's previous all-time highs in the previous cycle. I'll just finish off this video with a little bit of USDT dominance analysis. Now you can see the weekly BX trender is showing a nice sell-off. We're getting lower lows, and unfortunately we have made an attempt to break beneath the weekly 50 TMA, but unfortunately we have actually made another attempt higher, and being a weekend, unless something crazy happens, we will probably end up closing this week above the weekly 50 TMA. Jumping over to the daily chart, if my internet will cooperate with me, you can see again, it looked like we were going to close beneath the daily 50 TMA, but we've just seen that bounce away. So it is possible we do make another attempt lower on Bitcoin, whether we come down to 104,000 or 102,000, 100,000. Ideally, I would want to see this breakout zone here of 105,000 hold. But you think about it, that's a $3,000 sell-off. And that would absolutely decimate altcoins and obviously get the fear going. We might be able to see our long-short ratio get out of whack or liquidations pick up, which are signals that Michael Pizzino likes to see for a pivot point low, while still printing a higher low on the weekly time frame. And if we do breach this line, but just for a wick, it might potentially set us up for an inverted head and shoulders with a price target of 120 something thousand dollars. So there's obviously so many theories out there, but for now, it looks like we are going to need at least a couple more days or a couple of tens of more candles on the 4-hour chart before we see new all-time highs. But I definitely do believe new all-time highs are coming. Quick look at XRP, you can see that we have been closing above the daily 50 TMA, which is a sign of strength. You can see sometimes we'll break out and we'll need potentially weeks and weeks to consolidate here before we see this huge move up. So obviously what happens is people are going to lose interest, they're going to sell their bags or start shorting or just go do something else. And then you get this big gotcha bar, as Michael likes to call it. People FOMO in, pushes the price higher, and yeah. So over on Ethereum, you can see I was wondering whether I should sell or buy more. Thankfully, I didn't buy more, but I also didn't sell. You can see Ethereum's attempted to close back above the 50 TMA, but we have ended up selling off down below it. And Solana has just not been able to close above the 50 TMA at all. So of the large cap altcoins, XRP looks the strongest in my opinion, just off of the 50 TMA analysis alone. I will do a more detailed altcoin analysis video later. Otherwise, this video is going to be like 40 minutes long. Quick look at the US dollar index. You can see since around the end of January, we've turned this market bias and the 50-day TMA as resistance, and we've just been rejected off it time and time and time again. And obviously, Jason and Michael Pizzino do a much better job of covering the US dollar than I do, but you can just see here, it looks like a huge distribution pattern where you've got your last point of supply here. It's failed at the previous lows and it's just continued lower. And we even have a hidden bearish divergence on the stochastic RSI, which usually shows that the downtrend will continue, along with increased selling pressure on the weekly BX trender. Obviously, lower US dollar is great for assets like stocks and crypto. Unfortunately, DOT is not doing very well. CRO, not doing great either. ADA, not doing great. BNB is looking pretty good. You can see we've got our 2 green weeks on the weekly BX trender. We're above the weekly 50 TMA, and we're attempting to hold above the daily 50 TMA. Now you can see with BNB, just like XRP, sometimes you'll consolidate, you'll break out, break back below it, consolidate for ages, have this final fake move down before the big pump happens. So we could see potentially 2 or 3 weeks of sideways grinding here before we see a major move. Now SUI is coming up on the 50-day TMA, so I really do hope it closes back above it to put itself in a position of strength like XRP, BNB and Bitcoin rather than like the other weak coins. Rune is just struggling. I usually like to trade it on a 4-hour time frame rather than a daily time frame just because of how volatile it is. When you wait for confirmation on the daily, most of the move has already happened. But at least in the past, but it looks like recently the 50-day TMA strategy has been doing pretty great. Like you can see again, you break out, consolidate for ages, and then you get this parabolic move. And on the flip side, shorting it with the 50 TMA strategy is also really awesome. Same with Render. It's not doing too great. You would technically still be in a short if you did short. Psy, on the other hand, has been an amazing performer. Now you can see here, we closed back above the 50 TMA. Obviously, we had resistance on the 50% level, as Jason and Michael always talk about it. When it gets approached from the underside, you should expect some resistance. And we did get about 2 days of selling. But one thing that I find really interesting is we butted right through the institutional sell zone, made a local high, flipped the institutional sell zone as support, and it looks like we could be making a potential double bottom here. So if we consolidate here for a bit longer, we might potentially make a triple bottom as other altcoins grind sideways, still well below their previous peaks from May. Psi could be consolidating at or above the May peaks, and would in turn make it a stronger, better performer in the next leg up. Pepe, same story. It is with as most of the other altcoins looking a little bit tragic. And Sweatcoin, something that I was really glad that I sold way back here in 2024. Now, in like October 2024, I was like, why didn't I sell this back in March or like December 2023? Well, I'm glad I sold it. Like, look at that. It's down, I don't even know, like 70%? Obviously, it would have been nice if I had been able to sell one of these wicks up here, but at least I'm still not holding this bag. And this is what a lot of altcoins look like. Like, this is why I mostly try to stick to Bitcoin. Like, imagine if you bought somewhere up here. Like, anyways, that's pretty much all for today. If you want to join me in doing some 1 hour and 4 hour Wyckoff analysis, make sure to join TIA Premium. You can go watch some of Jason and Michael's YouTube videos, and yeah.